PhD from the Andhra University. He has also done PG Diploma in Industrial Relation and Personal Management from Sri Venkateswara University, Tirupati. He is a JRF in law. Sir has also taught many subjects throughout his teaching career, including jurisprudence, law, human rights, code of criminal procedure, and intellectual property rights. Welcome, you, sir.
Yeah, very. Good morning, everyone. I think the program started a couple of days back, and then you must have been, of course, listening to number of eminent speakers. And the topic, which of course is allotted to me in this particular session, is natural method of research. And then they said that you also have to speak on the metaphysical approach. Basically, what I would do in this particular lecture is that I would first of all tell you what is natural law, and I would distinguish between what is natural law and the law of nature. And of course, I would also talk about why natural law is considered to be a higher law. Why we say it is a moral law, it is a perfect law. Because when we talk about a higher law, obviously we tend to become idealistic. And we visualize a law which of course is perfect, which of course is something which cannot be questioned at all. And so the higher law, that of course I would be focusing upon. And then of course I would also be touching upon what is so natural in the natural law. Now, why we say it is natural. For example, what is natural? Once upon a time, to be moral, it was natural. But today we of course understand human nature in materialistic terms. And then today when we talk about what is natural, for example, you cannot survive without food. You cannot survive without water. These are natural requirements. So from there, of course, you can understand from what is natural, how, of course, we should go forward. And then, of course, Thomas Hobbes, because it was Thomas Hobbes who converted natural law into natural rights. So when we talk about Thomas Hobbes, because one very important, and because I think you're all introduced to the basics. Okay. In case you have any questions to ask me, I would be very happy if you can interrupt me. You can always interrupt me, okay? So when we talk about Thomas Hobbes, we will understand Thomas Hobbes had discarded the higher form of natural law. And he has embraced the lower form of natural law, today which we of course understand as natural rights. And today when we talk about human rights, because so from natural rights, a step further is human rights, and then rights of man, and then so when we come to the concept of human rights, I would also let you know as to what can be the broad distinction between what is a natural right and what is a human right. Though of course we use it synonymously, but then there are some differences precisely between a right which of course was in yesteryears called as a natural right, and today we call it as a human right. And then now, okay, let me start. Now, higher law, natural law, higher law. See, why this higher law? Why, of course, this higher law is given so much of importance? And then why do we always say that the human law, which of course is made by the human lawmakers, that should be in consistence with the higher law? These are so many things here. But even before that, so when we say natural law, we say it is normative. When we talk about law of nature, that is based on science. For example, we all feel hungry, we all of course, we require sleep, and then we of course reproduce. These of course are common to animals also. So law of nature is something common to both human beings and also the animals. But when we talk about normative law, that means natural law. So natural law is something which basically tells you what is right and what is wrong. And that is something normative. That means you make a judgment. You make a judgment on the other people's conduct, and then of course you criticize your own self. This particular ability to distinguish between right and what is wrong, that is peculiar to human beings only. And that is what makes us so unique. And that of course is where I say that this natural law which is normative, that of course is something which is within us and which enables us to distinguish between what is right and what is wrong and so on and so forth. But then here, because my time is 1.5 hours, I suppose, and I have a very long journey to travel. So what I would say here is that when we talk about Thomas Hobbes, no, it was Thomas Hobbes who famously said that there is no justice in nature, there is no morality in nature, there is no society in nature. Nature is only power. Nature is only the power. So it was Thomas Hobbes who took a different turn. And he had such a pessimistic view of human nature. That pessimistic view of human nature, wherein of course he says that famously that man by nature is selfish. By nature, that is what we must understand. Man by nature is selfish, man by nature is quarrelsome, man by nature is pugnacious, and then life in nature is very short-lived. So here, Thomas Hobbes, when he is having such a pessimistic view of human nature, and then finally, of course, he comes to the conclusion that nature, of course, we have to escape from nature. That is something which is very important because in Western philosophy, if you see, they always wanted to escape from nature. They did not make any attempt to realize nature. Of course, that I would come to after some time in my discussions. So when we talk about this escaping from nature, so Thomas Hobbes, of course, he thought that we can escape from nature, of course, by entering into a social contract and creating a bigger power, the Leviathan, the supreme power, the immortal. And then he thought security, of course, is very important. So, as the methodology is concerned, I would come to that. So, Thomas Hobbes, why did he feel that security is very important? Because life in nature was very short-lived and everything was so uncertain. So to escape from the uncertainties of nature, so tomorrow, for example, so tomorrow when I come to Robert Nozick, see, here we understand that Thomas Hobbes and John Locke, even Locke went towards state. That means they traveled towards state. They talked about a political structure which is known as a state. But then when you come to Robert Nozick, you understand that Robert Nozick, he said that for the problems in nature, we have to explore the solutions also in nature only. So he did not go towards state, though unknowingly he go towards this. That means he doesn't realize that he has gone to the state. But then so far as Thomas Hobbes is concerned, of course, what I say is that, and here, I would tell you it was Thomas Hobbes who said that the solution to the moral dilemma is political. That means he said that he has taken you from moral towards the political. So far as the research methodology is concerned, when we say that today, a very perennial question is whether the political must be regulated by the moral or whether the moral, of course, is under the control of the political. This is, of course, a very interesting question because so long as we have the higher law, we, of course, want to control the political power through the higher law. And we want to ensure that the political, because so far as India is concerned, we say our constitution is a modern document, it is also a moral document. And then we put some limitations on the powers of the majority. And then this limitations on the powers of the majority is so absolute for the survival of a democracy. And then tomorrow, when of course I go into the details, I would be raising a very basic question whether judicial review is undemocratic in a democracy. Because when you talk about judicial review, because ultimately when you talk about a moral law and you want to control the political power through certain moral values, and you want to ensure that the political power, of course, is not misused, it is not, of course, used in an arbitrary manner. That is what, when we talk about human rights, because when I go into the question of human rights, so human rights, in my opinion, the best definition has been given by Professor Dworkin. You said human rights are rights against majority. That means there are certain things which even the majority cannot do in a democracy. So these rights are so important that you want to ensure that even the majority, because your minority cannot be put to that jeopardy. Because if everything the majority says is the law, then obviously we require some limitations and balances of the powers of the majority also. But traditionally the higher law had been serving that purpose. So that is a very important thing. Now, when it comes to Thomas Hobbes, when he said that order is more important than justice, that means order is more important than justice. This is where I would just tell the participants here. The jurisprudence for a very long time was understood as a branch of morality. It was understood as a branch of justice. That means we always understood that something which is moral, only that can be law. And we always understood that something which is immoral, it cannot be law also. Though for the present generation teachers, it is so acceptable that law can also be immoral. Because today we understand that morality and law are two distinct branches of learning. Today we understand that what is law and what ought to be the law. That means that of course is a particular methodology wherein tomorrow when I speak about positivism, so because I was just giving you some introduction with regard to what I would be speaking tomorrow. That lectures are interconnected. It's not that I would be focusing only on higher law today. Now, when we come to this positivism, and when we then understand that what is law is a question of fact, whether it's a good law or a bad law, it's a question of value. That's famously known as the fact-value dichotomy. That dichotomy is so important for so far as the positivists are concerned. So here I would now just come back to Thomas Hobbes. Now you see, when Thomas Hobbes questioned the higher law, so why did he question the higher law? Why was he so much not happy with the higher law? So what made him to challenge the higher law? Because the higher law, which of course is based on certain intangible goods, like salvation, like for example, you cultivate good qualities, wisdom, virtue. And these of course are the intangible goods. And Thomas Hobbes during his lifetime he saw that the number of wars were taking place. That means all the kings were fighting inter se for the higher law. No one exactly knew what is that higher law, but everyone was fighting in the name of higher law. So this higher law became a source of controversy because no one exactly was in a position to say what is that higher law. And people were always having that security was the biggest casualty there. I can give you an example immediately to make you understand. For example, when you talk about the higher law, for example, the existing authority, when he makes a law, you question his authority on the basis of a higher law. You say that your law does not contain that many morals. It is not that moral as it was, of course, the law made by your predecessor. That means this way, every time a law is made, you are questioning the existing authority. You are challenging the existing authority in the name of a higher law. And that became a source of or a perennial cause for insecurity. And when you want security, obviously you must accept somewhere that the law is the command of sovereign. That means whether your sovereign is good or bad. That means this, of course, where Thomas Hobbes says that the existing authority must not be questioned. And you should follow the existing authority. And when you follow the existing authority, of course, don't go into the question whether it is moral or immoral, because the solution to moral dilemma is political. That means once you go to political, then of course you get objective answers. And of course this can also be questioned because when we say that morals must be under the control of political, and we say it is the political which will dictate what is moral and what is immoral, some of us immediately we are not comfortable with this particular understanding. Because we say that, because there is a very important understanding, that is ethics is condemned to pluralism. So when we say ethics is condemned to pluralism, that means we say in ethics there are no definite answers. Because in ethics there are answers and answers and answers. But if you want certain answers, if you want definite answers, then of course you must go towards political. You must go towards a political. So that is where, when we talk about this higher law, no here, I would tell you that when Thomas Hobbes discarded the higher form of natural law, which was based on duties, so the higher law, the higher natural law was based on duties. And Thomas Hobbes converted a duty-oriented approach in natural law to a right-oriented approach when he, of course, converted the higher natural law into natural rights. Of course, this is something which is very, it's a U-turn. So until then, the duties were the basis of justice. And you have been told that you should cultivate good qualities. You have a duty to cultivate. That is what Aristotle said. That is what Thomas Aquinas said. That means they said we have, of course, we are guided by a purpose in life. And the purpose is to acquire good qualities. and we should try to become virtuous. Of course, we should try to inculcate good qualities. So that, they said, is the purpose of life. That is where, that is known as a teleological thinking. So because Thomas Hobbes discarded this teleological thinking, and he of course embraced the causal and empirical view of human nature. So that is where you talk about a shift from the teleological understanding of what is right and what is wrong to a causal and empirical view. So this causal and empirical view, which is of course based on certain scientific patterns and then objective answers, that we will come to tomorrow in my lecture. But right now, when we look at the higher natural law, because see, I am, so far as my personal views are concerned, right now I can tell you something which of course I felt after so many years of teaching. Now I think this higher natural law, which of course is now, it is not objective, it is something which is highly subjective, and then this duty-oriented approach, it of course is not that much welcome so far as the discipline of law is concerned. No, I would definitely argue with Thomas Hobbes and say that the duty-oriented approach is very important, and the higher natural law, the intangible goods, because Thomas Hobbes has taken only the materialistic view of human nature. There, of course, I will be giving my personal opinion tomorrow. And now, when we come to Thomas Aquinas, and then even before that, we can talk about Plato, Aristotle, and see what they, of course, had with regard, and what they have to say with regard to the higher law. Now, when we, because so far as Plato is concerned, most of you, because you're all teachers, you must be knowing, because Plato was 100% rationalist. He thought that whatever knowledge we get through the senses, that of course is something which is fallible always. And the pure knowledge, it is in the form of ideas. So Plato went beyond the world to search for the truth. That means that is the basic difference between Aristotle and Plato. Now, if Plato is a rationalist, Aristotle is both a rationalist and also an empiricist. Now, that is because Aristotle, of course, but then what Aristotle exactly refuted was, because Plato was his teacher. Now, Aristotle said that we do not have innate ideas, but we have innate reason. Now, Plato and Aristotle, basically, that is the fundamental difference. Because Aristotle wanted to search for the truth within the nature itself. He did not go beyond the nature. And Plato always, because Plato was living in a different world, in a world of ideas. And then he thought the absolute truth is something which is beyond this world. That you all know, because if I can explain that the simile of the cave, we must have studied that. Now we are all in darkness because we don't know what is right and what is wrong. We believe the shadows, and then we think they are all, of course, true. And then we think that this is the only light. But one of us escapes. He goes beyond the room, and there he sees the light. He understands that, okay, that this is the absolute truth. And see, like for example, Jesus Christ, or you can talk about any Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya. These are because they understood what is the truth. And when they came back, because they came back and they wanted to tell us that we are all living in shadows. And this is, of course, a world which is imperfect world. And the perfect world, it is something which is beyond. So when they wanted to tell us, because we are talking higher things now, higher law, higher things. So Plato said that, okay, this, because Socrates, he was obviously referring to Socrates, his teacher, who of course was given poison. And Plato felt very unhappy that his teacher, such a noble man, was treated so badly, and finally he had to drink that poison. So Plato is talking about an idealistic, because the society as it actually exists, and this idealistic way of understanding what is right and what is wrong. So he, of course, believed in certain ideas. For example, when we talk about Plato's theory of ideas, now you ask a basic question, whether the human being has come first, but the familiar question, whether the egg has come first, whether the chicken has come first. So Plato will say, the idea of chicken has come first. That means he will see everything first of all existed in the realm of ideas. That means these ideas to Plato, they are eternal, they are immutable. Because the philosopher mostly is not concerned with the question like what is the price of tomato, what is the price of aloo. So they are not interested in these worldly questions. They always search for, go for those things which of course are, because the project of Plato is very big project. He wanted to understand what actually flows. That means what actually comes to an end and what does not come to an end. Something which is eternal, something which is immutable, something, of course, which is long lasting. So we, of course, are generally bothered by only day-to-day questions or questions which, of course, concern us to the immediate in the immediate future. So we, of course, are not entering into bigger questions. When we enter into bigger questions, obviously, you have to understand what is this life, what will happen after life and death. That means whether there is life after death, whether we have a free will or not. So these, of course, are metaphysical questions. And these questions, when we come to positivism, of course, discarded this type of questions and this type of inquiry. And they reduce, of course, every particular understanding into a purely empirical understanding. But when we enter into metaphysical questions, these questions, of course, are very difficult to answer because science cannot answer these questions. So when Plato is talking about his ideas, and he said that ideas, of course, exist in a different world. Ideas exist in a different world. And now he is talking about the form and the substance. So where the form is concerned, that is, of course, eternal. Because the idea of a human being, that is eternal. And that way he distinguishes between the form and the substance. And because I have to go forward, when we come to Aristotle, Aristotle did not agree with his teacher. Because Aristotle thought that the truth, of course, is something which you have to search in this world itself. The truth is somewhere not, we don't have to go beyond this world. And what is, for example, idea for Plato? Aristotle thought, no, this theory of ideas is not good. And so far as the form is concerned, FORM, that doesn't exist in a different world. Aristotle thought the form is the characteristics of that particular species. For example, when we talk about a horse, all the horses have specific characteristics. So one horse can die, but the characteristics with the horses, so far as the substance is concerned, that of course you consume in your food as because if you take non-vegetarian food, but the substance has the potential to attain that form. For example, the egg, it can become a chicken. Of course, we consume the eggs, but the egg has the potential to become chicken. So ultimately, when we talk about the substance and the form, now Aristotle said the form is not something which exists in a different world. The form is attached to the substance. And the form is something which is basically the characteristics. For example, when you look at human beings, now all the human beings in the world have certain specific characteristics. That is the form of the human being. So where the substance is concerned, one of course might be having a bigger weight and a lesser weight. That of course depends on your body composition, how much you weigh, and so on and so forth. But the form of human beings, that of course is. So Aristotle said that. See here, what you have to understand is that Aristotle is an empiricist. Now I can give an example to make you understand that. So for example, teacher enters into the classroom, the blackboard is empty. Only after the teacher enters into the classroom, when he starts writing something on the blackboard, then the blackboard gets filled up. So Aristotle is saying that when we of course came onto this planet, our mind is empty. And when we touch something cold, the feeling of that cold, that means it goes into our mind. When we touch a hot object, that of course goes into our mind. But Aristotle said that we have reason which filters this particular knowledge from the external world. So he of course believed that we have an innate reason. But he said our mind is empty when we of course came onto this planet. And whatever, because he is saying that whatever knowledge we get, we get through our senses. So Aristotle believed in senses also. But his teacher Plato, he did not believe in senses at all. He thought, because he was always looking beyond the senses. And Plato said everything which is made of material, of course it will decay. Because behind the material world, there is the perfect world. So Plato was searching for the perfect world, which is of course beyond the material world. And now Aristotle, for example, you see, whatever you see in this physical world, that enters into your mind. But Plato is saying that the ideas are a different world. So ideas exist in a different world. And so whatever ideas you have in your mind, that is not because of this empirical world. These ideas are coming from a different world. So I think I made myself clear. And here, when we talk about, for example, because Professor Mrutyunjay wanted me that, sir, if you can focus on certain, because connect these topics to certain contemporary issues. Now, for example, when we understand, so Aristotle is not that relevant in science today, because the teleological theory which says that even a stone has a purpose, even a tree has a purpose. Now, this of course has not been that much accepted in the scientific community today. But Aristotle continues to be relevant in ethics and politics. That means, so far as what is a moral understanding, what is an ethical understanding, so far as we, the teachers here, we continue to give respect to Aristotle so far as what is that teleological understanding. Now, when we talk about the same-sex marriage, very recently I had given a very big lecture on same-sex marriage in my university. Now, this very vexed the question whether people of the same sex must marry or not. What is natural? What is unnatural? Now, these, of course, are being discussed, and when Supreme Court judgment has come. And when we look at it from the Aristotelian perspective, now, what is that Aristotelian perspective? What is the purpose of that particular human endeavor? Now, for example, if Aristotle is your vice chancellor here, and he is giving admissions in the Shimla National Law University. Suppose Professor Mrutyunjay tells, you know him, I suppose. When I say Professor Mrutyunjay, I am referring to the gentleman who is sitting next to me. So when Professor Mrutyunjay tells the Vice Chancellor, sir, a particular area in our Shimla, it is not represented properly so far as the intake of law students are concerned. So we should have some reservation for those students from that particular backward region. Or Professor Mrutyunjay will say, or this gentleman sitting next to me, he is also a faculty here. No, he will advise the Vice Chancellor that said, so far as the seats in the law college are concerned, they should be given to, because we should go for some affirmative action program. But Aristotle will say, what is the purpose of education? The purpose of education is that we have to develop that scholarly understanding. We have to, of course, enhance that scholarly skill and scholarly knowledge. So he will not accept the advice of Professor Mrutyunjay. He will not accept his advice, and he will say that no, we should give seats in the university only to those students who, of course, are good in academics. That is a very important understanding, because what is the purpose of that particular activity? And why did I say that I support the higher law? No, I am coming to that. Aristotle said even politics has a purpose. Because wherein he said that today we understand that politics, if I am not to be misunderstood, because I am a teacher, use my words with great caution. Today, politics is not considered to be that virtuous or that moral. And generally, people who are away from politics, they think, no, we cannot do politics. That is a area which is not the concern of good people. Somewhere you listen to this type of voices also. Because in politics you should be manipulative, of course you should fabricate the thing, you should of course, no, this is of course the modern understanding, and I'm sorry if I'm hurting anyone's feelings. But then Aristotle had a different understanding. Now what is the different understanding? Here, please concentrate. Now the lecture becomes slightly complicated. And then it takes a different turn now. Now, when we address a basic question, whether the good is prior to the right or the right is prior to the good. Now, this is something which is very important. Now, when we look at the teleological theories, they start with the good. Because they think that first of all we should know what is the good, and through the good they understand what is right and what is wrong. For example, I can tell you, Bentham, the utilitarian philosopher, he started with what is good. I can give you an easy example even before I go to Bentham. For example, some of you here, of course you're all teachers, but then your children, okay, whatever, they want to become IAS officers. So that is your goal. That is the good for you, becoming an IAS officer. Tomorrow you copy in the examination and become IAS officer. So you copied in the examination, but so far as the people who start with the good, the means are not important, whether you achieve the good or not. So anything which you do to achieve the good, it is always right. It is always. So that way they subordinated what is right to what is good. For example, when Bentham, you talk about Bentham. Now Bentham says that what is good? To Bentham, what is good is utility. And what is utility? It of course depends on pleasure and pain. So Bentham says any particular human activity which increases the pleasure, it is always to be welcome. It gives you pain, it is always to be avoided. So Bentham says that you must calculate the pleasure and pain, and you must see whether the pleasure is on the higher side or the pain is on the higher side. So if the pleasure is on the higher side, of course we should say it is right. Because what is good? Good is pleasure and increasing the pleasure. So anything which increases the pleasure is right. That is the reason Bentham said justice is subordinate to utility. Justice is because he said justice is subordinate to utility because he never believed in justice. He thought justice, of course, is only enhancement of utility is justice. And he also challenged that what is this challenge? He said you cannot understand justice without understanding utility. It is only through utility you can understand justice. This, of course, now when we start with the good, Aristotle will also start with the good. Aristotle will say that the purpose of politics is to make you good people, to make you virtuous, to give you that good understanding of what is right and what is wrong, and to make you good citizens so that you can be useful to the society at large. So that, of course, is a teleological understanding. So when Aristotle says everything is having a purpose, even politics has a purpose. Even politics has a purpose. For example, suppose you give a flute and you ask, you have a flute, and to whom the flute must be given. Okay. Now this gentleman sitting right to me next, he will say that, sir, I am of course the richest man in the city, so I can purchase your flute for, I can pay you 10 crores. No, he will say that, sir, I am the biggest, I am the strongest man in Shimla. But then Aristotle will give the flute to the person who can play the flute in a good manner. That means, for बांसुरी, if I can say this in one Hindi में, बांसुरी जो अच्छा बजाएगा उनको आप दे दीजिएगा. But because he wants to understand what is the purpose of the flute. And that is where Aristotle says we should of course take a decision in accordance with the, here Aristotle is connecting justice to virtue. That means he is saying that something wherein the morality, the justice, that cannot be separated. When we answer this type of questions, the purpose will give you an answer. The purpose will give you an answer. Now you see, now you will ask me a question, which of course I am anticipating, but even if you did not ask me, it is my duty to clarify. You will ask me, so even Bentham is interested in purpose. So what can be the difference between the approach of Bentham and Aristotle? Now Bentham will give flute to that person because he is interested in what? In maximum happiness. So that is not the consideration of Aristotle. He will give flute to that person who can play it in the best possible way. That, of course, is his understanding. So he is not further interested whether that will give you pleasure or whether the pleasure will be more than the pain. That is not his concern at all. So what Aristotle is concerned, his only concern is what exactly is the purpose of that particular mobile. What is the concern of that? What is the purpose of that flute? So he will give it to that particular person who can play it well. You understand that? Now here we come to some intra-personal comparisons also. मैं पहले हिंदी में एक बात बता देंगे. You all understand English, okay? No problem. For example, you can say that so far as this flute is concerned, so let us give to Sachin Tendulkar because he is a very good cricketer. Now, then what are you saying? So Sachin Tendulkar is a better cricketer than this man who plays the flute. So far as playing the flute is concerned, of course he is good. He is good in playing the flute. But Sachin Tendulkar is a better cricketer and he has a better reputation in the field of cricket than what this gentleman has in the area of flute. That means you are making comparison between different fields of discipline. One is flute playing and other one is cricket. And you are saying that, sir, of course the purpose is very important, but so far Sachin Tendulkar is concerned, he plays cricket so well. And his reputation as a cricketer is, of course, a very big reputation, a much better reputation than this gentleman who plays the flute. Because his reputation is not, in the area of flute, his reputation is not that high as Sachin Tendulkar's reputation in cricket. You understand that or not? So that means you are making a comparison which of course must not be. Are you following me? And now here, for example, when I auction the flute, now the richest man comes in, he outbids everyone, and finally he takes the flute. But what is he doing? He is only displaying the flute. Aristotle will say what? Flutes are meant to be played, but not to be displayed. Flutes are meant to be played, but not to be displayed. So here, what we understand is that when we go for this type of understanding of what is teleological understanding, now today, when we talk about same-sex marriage, so obviously very interesting question will come, what is the purpose of marriage? Because when the purpose of university is to impart education and develop that, here the purpose is something which cannot be defined so easily. It's a Herculean task. And then, because whenever we want to understand the purpose behind a particular activity or behind particular political practice or a social practice or an ethical practice, it is not that easy. The debates will be there. Because there are people who also question, for example, Dworkin. Dworkin says, here I want to tell you one thing. If I am, see, Rawls is also metaphysical to a certain extent. Now, Rawls said that, John Rawls, justice knows no moral desert. Justice knows no moral desert. That means John Rawls is saying that you don't deserve your parents. You don't deserve because you are born in an affluent family, it is not your merit. It is a contingency. It's a contingency. In the same manner, Rawls will say that, of course, if you say that, so I am a very naturally gifted person. Now, Rawls will say, your natural endowments, because you are naturally talented. Tendulkar might be naturally talented, but Rawls will say it is not something which, of course, is his own work. He is naturally talented. So Rawls will, on the basis of this particular understanding, he will say, it is not that you deserve it. That means, it is not that you deserve it. It is something which you got it. Because the rules, for example, the university has got rules wherein it accommodated students from a backward region. So the students who got seats from the backward region, you don't say they deserve it. Because it is only the rules. The university defined itself. So Dworkin says the university has got every right to define itself. The university can say that we will take students from the backward area. Or we will give students the seat in the sports category. Aristotle will not welcome it. Aristotle will say, let us go according to the purpose. That is where, when we enter into these bigger questions, so John Rawls, let me, because see, today itself, one sentence which you can write, John Rawls, his entire understanding is what? He wanted to give a theory of justice which is neutral between rival conceptions of the good. That is something wherein he wanted to be neutral. He wanted to give a theory of justice which is neutral between rival conceptions of the good. So whether we start with the good or whether we start with the right. Now here, John Rawls criticized Bentham on two grounds. What are the two grounds? The first important ground is that John Rawls criticized Bentham because Bentham started with the good, but John Rawls wanted to start with the right. So John Rawls has criticized Bentham by saying that you converted what is personal into what is political. Now he is criticizing Bentham by saying that Bentham converted what is personal into what is political. That means he ignored the separateness of persons. He ignored the distinctiveness of persons. What does it mean? For example, if you are having a problem in your teeth, or this, you go to a doctor, you are having the pain, doctor will of course remove he will give you some medicine, or he may take out the tooth, and then he can give you some medicine, and that way you get the pleasure. But here, the pleasure and pain, it is of only one human being. But Bentham, what he does, he converts what is personal. That means whatever decisions you take in your personal life, he will ask the legislator also to make the law on those lines only. So if you are a Benthamite legislator, what will you do? No, you will say that, okay, I will give pain to the minority, and if the minority asks you, why did you give us pain? The only answer you have is that is the only way to increase the pleasure of the majority. That means you are not answering questions of justice. You are only concerned because of the fundamental questions of justice. So according to John Rawls, justice is anterior to utility. Without answering the questions of justice, we should not go towards utility. Because the pleasure which is obtained through a wrong method, that should be discounted. Now every pleasure must not be counted. That is what John Rawls is saying. Because even today in India, you can say that if Modi's government goes beyond the constitution, makes a law, that of course might increase the happiness of the majority. and that of course must be welcome. But we are bound by certain values which are given in the constitution. So we don't go beyond the constitution, though it might increase the pleasure of the majority, because we are having a principled view of what is right and what is wrong. And we understand that the constitution must be followed even in difficult times. That is where we say that the promises must be kept. Once we made a promise, we should of course uh, keep the promise, and we should not be utilitarians. Now here, I would just, because whether you start with the right or whether you start with the good. Suppose you start with the good and you want to understand what is the purpose of marriage, and you say that the purpose of marriage is only procreation. If the purpose of marriage is only procreation, then obviously you will say that so far as the homosexuals are concerned, because they cannot fulfill that purpose, of course they are not eligible to get married, because they cannot fulfill that purpose. But suppose you take a bigger view of marriage, the bigger teleology of marriage, and you say marriage is of course not only for procreation, it is for a bigger thing. What is that? Companionship. An exclusive commitment to one particular individual, wherein loyalty is very important, wherein the faithfulness is very important, where of course you love that other person and you want to be with that person throughout your life. If that is what is the essence of marriage, if that is what the, because you are here, you see, here, when you understand liberal non-judgmental grounds, no, the liberals, they don't actually enter into the battlefield at all. They always want to tell you, let us be neutral. Let us respect their autonomy, homosexuals. Let us respect their free will. And let them decide whether they will get married or not. Let the law not give an affirmative answer, whether it should be done or not. Because let us be neutral. Let us be neutral. That is what John Rawls, he wanted to be neutral between rival conceptions of the good. But then if you say that justice is not neutral, justice is judgmental, you have to make a judgment this way or other. And then when you say justice is judgmental, then obviously you got to enter into the telos of marriage. You have to understand the purpose of marriage. No, you cannot say that, let us leave it to liberal non-judgmental grounds. So that way I think that, if I am not to be mistaken, no, you are escaping from the reality. That means you want to be neutral. And then being neutral, and in this world, oh no, I will connect it to a bigger issue once again. The bigger issue is what? For example, when you say that you should be neutral, no, Rawls was taking a step back from the real world. No, he's going behind the veil of ignorance. Because he thought any theory of justice which you work out after seeing the empirical realities in the actual world, no, you cannot do justice. So to do justice, you should take a step back. That is what he learned from Immanuel Kant. Because when you take a step back behind the veil of ignorance, you can understand what can be the principles of justice. So there, behind that veil of ignorance, so you try to be neutral. You try to be neutral. And how can you be neutral? Because only when you know that you are an Indian, then you will, if you know that you are Indian, you will support Indians, because you are also an Indian. Suppose you do not know whether you are an Indian or a Pakistani, then of course you can be neutral. So this neutrality can be achieved only with certain techniques. So John Rawls, behind the veil of ignorance, he worked out what are the principles of justice. And today, if you see that, so far Israel war is concerned, no, Israel of course must be neutral, and it should not only give importance to its own people, other people are also equally important. But that is of course something which we only preach in the classrooms. And when it comes to actual method of dispensing justice, then what we do? Generally we of course favor our own people. We say that, okay, he is a, and here when we talk about the bigger like things, human rights, I shall come to that now. So now Aristotle, and then I give it to your wisdom, because when you talk about purpose of marriage, metaphysical questions or very empirical questions, and then you want to know what is the bigger purpose of marriage, and then you want to understand what is the telos of marriage, and finally you may conclude that, okay, so homosexual people also can get married, because the higher purpose of marriage, even they can fulfill that. See, once you understand the purpose, then you will understand what qualities must be celebrated. That means the purpose will tell you what qualities you must have to achieve that purpose. You understand that? Now I can give an example to make you understand. Before, of course, I have to go to Immanuel Kant now. But then I will summarize all the important points. But then even before going to Immanuel Kant, let me give an example to make you understand how the purpose and the virtues are connected with each other. Once you understand the purpose of marriage, then you can say that only these people can get married. Why? Because you said purpose of marriage is procreation. Then you said only people who can procreate can get married. That means therein you are trying to establish a connection between the purpose and the qualities which you must, of course, or the virtues you must have to fulfill that purpose. So suppose we take an argument. What is the argument you are taking? So we will fulfill the purpose through other methods. Now, the fulfilling the purpose is important. And we can do it through other methods also. Aristotle will not permit you. Aristotle will tell you whatever virtues you must have, that must fulfill the purpose. Now, if you fulfill the purpose through other methods, then Aristotle will not accept. For example, I was studying a very standard book. In that particular book, it is written that now there are certain people who basically will excite the crowd when the match is going on. So they of course do gymnastics. That's why they tumble on the ground and then they of course get up and then they behave like a clown, like a joker, and then the crowd gets excited. And that is, so once you understand what is the purpose here to excite the crowd, and what is the means? The means are that you have to tumble, you have to do some gymnastics. That is of course the only method through which you can excite the crowd. But let us suppose there's a girl. In that particular case I studied, the case is from America. There's a girl. And the girl, of course, she has no legs. And then she is, of course, physically handicapped to such an extent she can only she can only go on the wheelchair. But she, on the wheelchair, she will just go on the wheelchair and excite the crowd. She will not do the tumbles. She will not do the acrobatic things there. But then when she will, on the wheelchair she goes and then she does so many things to excite the crowd was getting more excited than these traditional understanding of how to make the crowd get excited. The traditional method is do gymnastics. That is of course something which of course was accepted. That is the only way through which you can excite the crowd. But the girl argued that even I excited the crowd and I excited them more, but not through the traditional method. So whether now what did you understand that the purpose and the qualities which you should have. Now if you say the purpose of marriage is this, and if you take the argument I can fulfill that purpose through other methods also. Are you following me now? So these of course are very important philosophical questions. Now, of course if my teacher sitting next to me, if they accept these are metaphysical questions. Now whatever cannot be answered through science, we always say it is something metaphysical. That is the only way to escape. Because even I learned how to escape from big questions. So, in big questions, you can always say they are beyond the physical world. And that way you can. So now, because even the Supreme Court judges, if you see the judgment given by Justice Chandrachud and other judges, some of the judges they express very openly, we cannot understand the purpose of marriage. It's a very Herculean task. It's a very difficult thing. So now I just wanted to put you in that direction, wherein you can understand. And here, when we move from Aristotle a step forward, and we want to understand now, see, John Rawls criticized Bentham also on another ground. One ground is he converted what is personal into what is political. The other ground is Bentham subordinated what is right to what is good. Because in a freedom-loving country like America, they of course believe in rights. Because they don't want the law to too much not to interfere in their personal life. So they want the law to be at a distance. So they will say our rights are very important. And they of course will take that argument that we will understand what is right and what is wrong, but the state not dictate us as to what is right and what is wrong. Now that is of course wherein you start with the right and you want to understand because you will not impose only one particular type of good upon others. You say we are a liberal society, let him decide what is good to himself, let him decide what is good to him. So let us not try to impose only one good upon others. Because this is something, even Robert Nozick tomorrow, I will tell you, he says compulsion is injustice. Compulsion is, because they believe only in voluntarism, voluntary transaction. So any compulsion is something which they don't accept. Now let us come to human rights, which of course are considered to be metaphysical concepts. And now when you come to human rights, we have the towering personality of Immanuel Kant. And then we have to understand Immanuel Kant properly to see how he supports human rights. And then that is of course a very, I would say it is not that difficult provided you understand Immanuel Kant in a proper way. Now I will ask you, will you also answer my questions? Can I ask them questions?
Yes.
Okay. Obey your thirst. Obey your thirst. This was the advertisement of a very famous cold drink company. Obey your thirst. What do you understand by that? Obey your thirst. So when you obey your thirst and when you take that cold drink, are you acting in a free way?
No.
That means or not?
The thirst becomes the master.
The thirst becomes the master. That means here Immanuel Kant is saying that when we want to understand what exactly, because metaphysical question, whether we actually have free will, whether we are actually autonomous, whether we have the dignity. Because so far as Immanuel Kant is concerned, when we talk about human rights, now the very concept of human rights is based on moral universalism. That morality, of course, is universal everywhere and then moral. And the biggest challenge to human rights is cultural relativism. That means moral universalism versus cultural relativism. No relative world. For example, when we understand that we live in a different world, now Hans Kelsen, who followed Immanuel Kant to a very great extent, his basic epistemology of knowledge, his basic understanding is law must be pure. That means he is saying every science has got its own answers. Every science has got its own methodology. So he says that empirical sciences, for example, the famous, because you must be teaching Kelsen in your classrooms, but if you are caught committing the offense of theft, you ought to be punished. So why is he saying ought? Anyone? Whether there is any requirement for the ought to be converted into is?
Actually, the question of age could be solved by a sociologist, but a jurist can only talk about what ought to be done.
Yeah. Here, when you understand is that in the empirical world, the thief might escape punishment. He might give bribe to the judge, or he might, of course, put fear into the mind of the police. He can escape punishment. But in the normative world, we say that he ought to be punished. And Professor Mrutyunjay says that he is not punished. In the mundane world, in the physical world, he escaped punishment. That is the basic difference between science of norms of science and norms of law. Because so far norms of science is concerned, we of course are interested in ease. We want to see whether it actually has taken place as it has to take place. If it doesn't take place, then we think something is wrong with the theory and we make amendments to the theory. But when we say the thief ought to be punished, and of this gentleman sitting next to me, he will come and say the thief is not punished. I will say, though he is not punished, I will continue to say he ought to be punished. I mean, he is not actually punished, but I will continue to say he ought to be punished. Why? Because the ought is backed up by another ought. That means what gives the validity to one ought is, the ought is not validated by the is. Ought is normative, is the efficacy. That means whether the validity depends on efficacy or not. Now, Kelsen says validity and efficacy are two different questions. Because the ought is validated by a higher law, higher ought. So that way, when we talk about a world, then of course we want to see conceptualism. Now, the world doesn't, we cannot understand the world as it is. First of all, we have to make a concept. We have to develop a conceptual understanding. That is what Kelsen did. That is what Austin also, because to many philosophers, many jurists, some of them say Austin is an empiricist. But there are arguments which say that Austin is a conceptualist. Now, for example, tomorrow, of course, I will talk about it. Right now, I can give you an example. Now, when tomorrow we see Professor Hart will come, when Hart says that Austin is only an empiricist and Austin understood sovereignty only as a person or a body of persons. Now, it all depends on whether you want to look at Austin as an empiricist or as a conceptualist. If you look at him as a conceptualist, of course, you cannot say Hart is right. Hart was understanding Austin only as a pure empiricist. But there are because Julius Stone, no less a man than Julius Stone, he said Austin is a conceptualist. That means
There might be confusion in someone's mind. What is conceptualist? There might be some confusion. Are you aware about conceptualist? Idea of concept. No? So they
okay. See, when we talk about a concept, when you want to understand what is the state, when you want to understand what is law, when you want to understand what is right and what is wrong, because these are very abstract things. These are, in my opinion, metaphysical things also. It all depends on when Kelsen gave the pure theory of law. So why did he say that? Because what is the norm? What is the fact? Facts exist in the physical world. No, to understand the facts, you require a concept. To understand the facts, you require, and what is the norm? Norm is the objective meaning of the facts. Norm is not the law which you, for example, you made a terrorism act. So that, according to Kelsen, is not the law. What is the law? You give meaning to the particular fact. What is the meaning? The terrorist ought to be punished. Now that is where you bring in the ought element. And anything which cannot be reduced into an ought element, according to Kelsen, it is not law. So first of all, you should say terrorists ought to be punished. And this you are saying in a different world. That means the norms exist in the world of ideas. Norms don't exist in the physical world. In the physical world, you have only facts. And the normative meaning of the facts is the norm. And the normative meaning of the facts is the norm. So when you construct a concept and you want to understand the empirical world through that particular concept, that of course, Mrityunjay, with your permission, I will address those bigger issues tomorrow.
Yes.
I can now, because go to Immanuel Kant. Now the gentleman sitting right to me, he had given the correct answer, obey your thirst. No, because according to Immanuel Kant, morality cannot be understood through empirical knowledge. That means this is something which is saying morality is something which is a priori. Now he says that we of course are a priori when we understand what is right and what is wrong. And here you can take any number of examples. For example, you feel like eating an ice cream and then you go and take the ice cream, you think that you are independent, you are taking an independent decision. But actually you are only obeying because what is already within your genes, the desires which are already within you. Now you are only satisfying those desires, you are not autonomous. Now here Immanuel Kant talks about autonomy versus heteronomy. Now what is that heteronomy? Acting in accordance with nature. But man is autonomous and man can conquer the forces of heteronomy. That means once you understand that you of course have a autonomy and you can understand what is right and what is wrong independently of the empirical world, and you are trying to understand what is right and what is wrong in a different world from a different perspective, then of course you are talking about metaphysical things. You can correct me, you can always intervene. But I don't mind if you intervene and then it's a discussion. So when we talk about two worlds here, one is the empirical world, the other one is the intelligible world. So far the intelligible world is concerned, we are not, because Immanuel Kant, he also accepted that we of course have appetites. So he never said that Bentham is absolutely wrong. He said that of course we belong to the world of appetites, wherein of course we satisfy our appetite. We of course want pleasure, we want to avoid pain, that cannot be completely refuted. But then he also said we also live a life of reason. And reason is something which makes you independent. Reason is something which of course makes you take that autonomous decisions. And through reason only you are independent. So here, you must have heard that famous statement of David Hume who said that reason is only a slave to your passions and desires. Now there they understand reason in an instrumental manner. Now when Bentham understands reason in an instrumental manner, he is saying that reason is a means to an end. But according to Immanuel Kant, reason will tell you what is the end you must choose. That means you are an end in yourself. Morality is an end in yourself. Now I can give you some questions now. And if you can answer this question, please make an attempt because your teachers are answering, but then you can also make an attempt to answer. And then suppose you give some money to a beggar and then you acted out of compassion. And then you give some money to a beggar because you thought that he requires your help. Whether what you have done is morally right and morally wrong.
As per Bentham, if I am trying to show compassion or trying to look at the consequence, then my moral action is governed by utility. But if I choose certain action which is an end in itself, not thinking about consequence, then that is a Kantian approach.
So far the Kantian approach is concerned, he is asking you to do it as a matter of duty. That means when you help someone, don't think that you will be appreciated by others. Others, of course, will look at you in high esteem, and from tomorrow onwards, your place in society will be very high. So if you do that charity because of these reasons, Immanuel Kant will say that your action is not morally to be appreciated, or it is not morally 100% with the right way of. Though of course he will say that because duty versus inclination. No, inclination. Suppose you do something for the sake of that, you want to satisfy your preferences, you want to satisfy your interests, you want to satisfy your demands. Then of course you are acting in an empirical way. Suppose you want to be, one more question. So this question might also put your teachers into difficulty because one of your teachers is my student. Now the question here is that suppose you say that you love your life and then you go on living your life. You love your life. According to Immanuel Kant, when that can become a virtue, for example, you are loving your life and then you are going ahead. You get your cholesterol checked up, you get your BP checked up because you love your life, you want to lead a longer life. But then when does it become a getting cholesterol checked up and BP checked up? These are
These are all needs.
These are prudential things. These are, that means, but Immanuel Kant will tell you what. For example, the doctor says that your life is very short now, you are in the fourth stage of cancer, you will die very soon. Even then, if you make a duty to live, that means so long as life is very good, life is very comfortable, you are loving life, and then everything is good, you are getting all rasgullas and getting all the things, materialistic things, AC, bangla, but when life becomes miserable, life becomes very difficult to live. In that situation also, suppose you say, I will live because it is my duty to survive. It is my, then of course it is morally. But means where we conquer the empirical things and we say that it is our duty to do this type of things. So when you attack that particular thing with your duty, now you see the same. You can also give an example before I ask you any question. Anyone is so innovative to give an example?
The question of euthanasia, for example.
Euthanasia, yes.
So somebody say, I am suffering from pain and I want to die. Now, what's the duty as a human being? To live even if the pain is there. It's a Kantian approach.
Yes, so to live as a, because you think that you should not use yourself also as a means to an end. That means you of course cannot use others as a means to an end. You also cannot use your own self as a means to the end. Because we are all ends in ourselves. We are all ends in ourselves. So don't do anything for the sake of something else. Do it because it is the right thing to do.
Then
So,
what about the idea of a living will, which the Supreme Court has now?
that I will come to because so far the living will is concerned, that was a matter of discussion in our department a couple of days back when High Court judge just come and then this question was asked. I would answer because so far as this living will is concerned, I will come to that when I answer the questions. Right now, I want you to, because Professor Mrityunjay gave the example of euthanasia. Can you give me any other example? Can you, wherein you are going against your inclination? That is what I am saying. Because so long as you are going in accordance with your inclinations, life is very good. But when you have to go against the inclinations, you are asked to do something which is basically against your inclination. It is very difficult. Therein you are fighting against your nature. That means autonomous. You are, and if you can conquer the forces of heteronomy, then of course you are complete. So Immanuel Kant had given, yeah.
So we have been discussing about achieving something all the way. So there are some things which are not in control, and we start. Some things just go away, just go out of us.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, today in today's world, there is a decay of reason.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, where do we situate that a person who is having that Kantian morality of reason, of acquiring reason, and how is he supposed to behave in this era of decay of reason? Who will answer it? Will it be answered by Plato's ideas beyond the world, or will it be answered by Kantian ideas of reason or acquiring reason?
See, Plato and Kant, Immanuel Kant, both of them went into a different world. Immanuel Kant also talked about the intelligible world. Well, Plato talked about ideas. So anyone who wants absolute answers, no, because if you want something which is immutable, something which doesn't flow, something which doesn't decay, something which is not only a matter of 2 or 3 days, you want it to be everlasting. You want that type of a knowledge. So obviously you have to enter into a different world. And that is, of course, you go beyond the word, like Kelsen, like pure theory of law. Because if you want pure answers, if you want answers which are uncontaminated, unadulterated, then of course you have to escape from the empirical world. Are you following?
So, but the procedure, but the procedure adopted is empirical by Kelsen also.
The procedure adopted by Kelsen is empirical.
Like for example, the hierarchy of norms, the concept of hierarchy.
What
of
is
norms.
that empirical thing there?
So,
I don't
like-
think empirical, because empirical is something which happens in this particular world. Kelsen has closed his eyes to the realities of the world. Of course, when it comes to the grand norm,
Yes,
he had to go beyond the world. I mean, beyond that conceptual understanding.
I can answer your question. You are asking that decay of reason, and it is believed that everybody is reasonable as per Kant. Every human being has capability to understand what is right, what is wrong. That normative capability is there in every human being. But what happens then when we don't apply that capability? We don't use that capability, and we are governed by inclinations and desires and passions. Then we are not applying our reason which is inherent in us, in every human being. So for Kant, it was a great dishonor to the human dignity to treat any human being as a chattel, as a child, as a naive person. He believed that there is a common standard of reason living in every human being.
Okay, Murali, I would just answer the question in a different way also. Can you tell me what can be the difference between the preachings in the Bible and Immanuel Kant's theory? Even Bible says, don't do to others what of course you would not like to be done to yourself. Whether there is any difference between what Immanuel Kant said and the Bible said? No, the entire class can think about it. Whether there is any difference between what is said in the Bible, that don't do to others which you do not want to be done to you, and what Immanuel Kant said. Teachers also can.
Maybe this might be.
No, no, you see, never feel any.
Yeah. So maybe because there is that element of afterlife and the consequences of the things that you will do. So there is still a causal relationship which is there when we are talking about Bible. As far as Kant is concerned, he's not getting into that realm.
Okay.
Just to add to your question, I have been having this point in my head. Like you talked about that a person taking that example of life, leading life. I love life when I'm rich, I love life when I'm poor. Building on that idea, Gita talks about the idea of yogi purush, the person who is sum in all circumstances. So whether he's in adversity, whether he's in richness, he will be the same. So because you have asked this question of comparison between Gita and Bible and Kant.
Yeah, Professor, what I was trying to tell you is that you are basically fighting against your inclinations. That is what Kant is saying. So long as everything is going on well, okay, everyone can do it. But when something hostile happens, things start going the other way, and life becomes so miserable. And then you want to put an end to your life. No, in that situation also, you should think it is my duty to do. That is what Immanuel Kant is saying. Now, one more important thing. So far, the difference between Bible and Immanuel Kant. Can Professor Mrityunjay, you can answer? You want to?
Yes, sir. When I say don't do something wrong, I stop there. If Bible is saying only this line, don't do something wrong, then the idea of wrong is to be determined either by categorical reasoning, then the very action is bad because it is not dependent upon some consequence. So that is a categorical argument, what Kant will prefer. When I say don't do something wrong to others, what you cannot do to yourself, then I am coming to my own, even I cannot harm myself. Not I cannot harm others, but I can also not harm myself. It is also a Kantian argument because.
Okay, I can. Sorry for the interruption. He, of course, both the professors are so good. They, of course, are always on the right track when they answer the questions. But then the example which I can give you immediate to make you understand immediately is that, of course, this is borrowed knowledge. It is not the example which I invented myself. So I should be very frank with you, candid with you. The best thing a teacher must do is that, and because Mrityunjay continues to be my, never deceive yourself. That is what I keep on telling myself every day. So the example which I studied in a very standard book is that, suppose your mother is in the hospital and you just came to know that her eldest son, he met with an accident and he died in the accident. Now whether you want to give that information to your mother or not. Now, if you go according to Bible, it will say that don't do to others what you do not. So you will think that your mother, of course, will be affected by that news, and what will be her situation, and then you want to, for example, finally you come to the conclusion that if this news is not disclosed to her, it is better. But Immanuel Kant will not take this. Immanuel Kant will say that act as a rational being. Because this emotion, all these are the worldly things. These are empirical things, passion. He will ask you act according to reason. So he will tell you that whatever is the situation, tell your mother the truth. And then don't worry about the consequences. That means he will, because that is the difference between what Immanuel Kant said and Bible said. Because do not do to others what you would not like to be done to yourself. That is, of course, which is very, like Professor Mrityunjay said, it is not contingent. Contingent means what should I do? I'm not concerned about the consequences. I'm not concerned about what will happen to my mother after she gets this information. As a rational person, it means don't use your emotion as a means to an end. The end is always the correct path to pursue. And the end is disclose this news to your mother. What will be the consequences? So that is where one very interesting personality of Immanuel Kant emerges.
So, but there are layers of duties. I mean, there is one sort of duty to not let the mother feel pained more. That is also answered by Kant, right?
No, Kant did not enter into those questions at all, if I understood Kant correctly, because he is always asking you to act in a rational manner. But he says that there's a different world, wherein you, of course, have to take independent decisions there. So don't be guided, of course, by this passion, emotion, I'll be appreciated or not, but do it as a matter of duty. It is the right thing to do. One more question which comes your way is that you can answer, say, I have some 3 or 4 more questions. Okay?
Yes, sir.
What is the difference between what the Bible said and what Bentham said? Because Bible says that, okay, speak the truth. Always speak the truth. Always speak the truth. What can be the difference between a utilitarian approach and what is written in the Bible?
So always speak the truth, no matter it would lead to pleasure or pain. Whereas from Bentham's perspective,
He is in the right direction, yeah.
from Bentham's perspective, speak the truth that would lead to maximum happiness.
Okay. So Bentham will say that what is, because you should not become dogmatic. And Bentham says there are no simple solutions to complex problems. Now, there are no simple solutions to complex problems. They are a priori answers. They are, of course, only a few answers. And a priori you answer every question in the society. So to Bentham it appeared to be very illogical. Bentham thought the solution will come after the problem has come. There can be no solution even before the problem has come. Try to understand me. For example, अगर आपको थोड़ा हंसा भी दे, आप लोग हंसना भी चाहते होंगे, हाँ, क्योंकि बहुत दिन से ऐसे नहीं होंगे. Suppose आप अपना New Year resolution बना रहे हैं, okay, because I teach in BHU, वो ज़्यादा हिंदी सिखा दिए वो लोग मुझे. Basically I am a South Indian. आप New Year resolution बना दिए हैं, कल से बहुत से खूबसूरत लड़की भी अगल बगल में जाएंगे तो देखेंगे नहीं, कल से मीठा ज़्यादा नहीं खाएंगे, कल से सच बोल देंगे. New Year resolution. The next day when you came out, that means आप hostel में लिखे हैं. That means you wrote this diary in nature. Hostel means nature. And when you came to society, the life in nature is different from life in society. When you say life in society, Karl Marx, Bentham, ये सब लोग आ जाएंगे. When you say life in nature, Americans, John Locke, they continue. They love nature. They want to live in nature. So whether love for nature is good, love for society is good, that's it. Question which of course I will leave to your own wisdom. लेकिन आप जब बाहर आए हैं तो आपको आपका दोस्तों ने बताया that girl is very beautiful. Then you said no, I am a सिद्धांतवादी, I will not look because मैंने कल फैसला किया हूँ तो मैंने. They said she is very beautiful. You said no, she might be the most beautiful woman on the earth, but then I will not see. But then they allude you to such an extent. Finally आपने सोचा आज देख लेंगे. तो आज आपने देख लिया. Then you went back to the hostel and you आपने कहा अपवाद नंबर 1. It's a all is very beautiful. That is how this empiricism versus the empirical world is different. And when you talk about this type of thing which you do in the hospital, Bentham said all natural rights are antisocial. Why did he say all natural rights are antisocial? Because when he talked about natural rights, they are putting impediments in your path of reforming the society. Whenever you want to bring about some changes in society, Bentham had contempt for common law. Bentham had contempt for these a priori things. So a priori things, for example, they will say promises always ought to be kept. No, Bentham will say no. Why should promises always ought to be kept? There is no dogmatic rule. So if you believe in this a priori thing, what will happen? The world will become closed. You have only few answers, and through those few answers, you are trying to solve all the problems in the world. So Bentham will say there are no simple solutions to complex problems. So it is very easy for Professor Mrityunjay to say, always speak the truth. But this gentleman will say, so what can be the consequences? If you speak the truth, 100 people are going to die. No, this gentleman will say that no, in that situation, it is better not to speak the truth. So that is an empirical answer. But he is taking an answer which is of course not in accordance with what is the reality there. He is taking a principled view, he is taking a prudential view. That means an instrumental understanding of what is right and what is wrong. Because when we say, for example, if you ask a utilitarian, why is equality good? What will he say? Anyone?
Because it will increase happiness.
It will increase the utility. Why is liberty good? It will increase the utility. But why is utility good? Utility is good in itself. Because the utility is inherent. It is intrinsic.
Sir,
Yeah.
so this Bentham has talked about that there are no simple solutions to complex problems. However, he explains all complex phenomenon very simplistically. I mean, he was the father of imperative jurisprudence.
Yeah. But then you see that consequentialist reasoning, wherein you have to enter into so many big questions, whether the pleasure will be more here, pain will be more. You have to calculate so many things before you arrive at an answer there. But suppose you are a rationalist, you believe in an armchair doctrine, and then you believe that only few truths are there, always speak the truth. So before you will not enter into the question at all, you will say speak the truth, that's all. That is the only answer you keep on giving. But to a consequentialist answer, you have to work out what can be the consequences in the short term, in the long term, and after analyzing all those things, then only you can arrive at an answer. Okay, so far as Immanuel Kant is concerned, I will give you one more example. And then one more question. I think only a few teachers are answering, let it be answered by others also. For example, Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative. Now, I will just give you a question and I will see. Suppose you are in dire need of money. So you go to a money lender or you go to a friend and you know that you cannot repay the money. You cannot repay the money and you have no intention to repay the money also. But you tell your friend that, no, I am in dire need of money, give me the money, and you make a promise, a false promise, that I will repay the money immediately because you yourself know that you cannot repay the money. And you yourself have no intention to repay the money also. Now, whether this is in accordance with the categorical imperative, how will you look at it? Because what you do must also be done by others. You should only advocate those things which others in your situation must also accept that. So can you universalize this? That false promise, what can be the consequences? Because if you don't enter into consequences, of course, Immanuel Kant never entered into consequences. But here, people, no less a man than John Stuart Mill, he faulted Immanuel Kant here and said that, Mr. Immanuel Kant, here you are also consequentialist in your approach. Now, whether Immanuel Kant is consequentialist here, now what does it mean? For example, our Professor Mrityunjay will say, sir, if you don't respect the promise, then others will also not respect the promise. So in the longer run, people will lose confidence in the institution of promise making. That is it not a consequentialist answer? Because you are worried about the consequences. And you are saying that no sir, if you do this, then others will also, because you cannot universalize it. If you universalize it, that means very soon people will stop believing promises. And the institution of promises will come to an end. This is the answer given by Immanuel Kant. Then immediately John Stuart Mill attacked him by saying that this is a consequentialist reasoning. But Immanuel Kant said this is not a consequentialist reasoning. So anyone in the audience, can give me any example how Immanuel Kant defended himself by saying that I am not giving a consequentialist reasoning.
Kant was not saying that whatever I'm saying as a maxim should follow consequence or calculate the consequence. He was focusing on the intention of the action itself and its moral worthiness. saying promise should be kept.
Yes. And then one more important thing is that Immanuel Kant said that, see, you are giving undue importance to your requirements. You are inflating your requirements and thereby you are putting yourself prior before and then you are deceiving the other person. That is the moral principle. He is not talking about the institution of promises which of course will lose their importance in the future and the promise making itself as a system may come to an end. He is not talking, though of course he talked about that. But his basic concern is what? You as an individual, you are doing something which is against the basic norms of morality. That means something which you should not do at all, wherein you are putting your needs prior to the other person's. That means you are making a false promise. Now, of course, what will be the consequences that he did not consider? He only said this can be the consequences, but that is not the approach which he had taken. The approach is a priori. What is that? A priori means what will happen. When you do that as an individual, you should not do that. Don't worry about the consequences because you are debasing yourself. You are using yourself as a means to an end. Are you following me or not? Now, one more question. Immanuel Kant will say there is no difference between suicide and murder. He will look at suicide and murder in the same manner. Now, why?
So I think it will be the same argument which we started with respect to euthanasia and self-harm. So that is a harm by somebody else. This is a harm by yourself to yourself,
Yeah.
to your body. So you cannot use again your body as to put it at an end to something. So
It doesn't matter whom you are killing,
Yeah.
whether the self or the other.
the other.
End of the day, you should not kill.
And there is a maxim known as categorical imperative of Kant, which says treat every human being not merely as a means but an end in itself. So not only you have to treat others as an end in itself, but also the yourself as an end in itself. You have not to further any other means.
So, I can give you a concrete example. He, of course, is right. This gentleman sitting right to me is equally right. Okay, it's not that because everyone. Because I'm 60 plus now. I'm obviously whatever. See here, when you suppose not you, X is having cancer. He is in the fourth stage. Doctor says his death is very imminent. Suppose he wants to. That means he has to endure the pain for a longer time. Suppose he commits suicide. He is using himself as a means to an end. He wants to escape from that. So you should not use yourself as a means to an end. I mean, you should suffer that cancer. And then you should invite only that natural death. So when you commit suicide, that means you are using yourself as a means to an end. And the same thing happens in the case of murder also. You are using some other person as a means to an end. So Immanuel Kant, he says that you should never use either yourself or the other person as a means to an end. Now, finally, okay, I have some more. I can go ahead?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So when we talk about utility, we have got two types of utility. One type of utility propounded by Bentham, other type of utility propounded by John Stuart Mill. And you all must be knowing that famous statement of John Stuart Mill. Anyone, even before I say that, anyone can say that?
It is better to be.
Yeah, you can also. It is better to die.
It is better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a pig satisfied.
It is better to die a human being dissatisfied rather than a pig satisfied because Socrates and fool of course only wants quantity, but Socrates wants quality. So utility is only talking about quantity. लेकिन यूटिलिटी का भी मैं आपको थोड़ा हंसा सकता हूँ बिकॉज थोड़ा हंसने का भी हमको अधिकार है तो यूटिलिटी का समस्या क्या है अगर आप कहेंगे बेंथम का भी मैं अप्रिशिएट करता हूँ बेंथम इज माय फेवरेट लाइक सचिन तेंदुलकर आपका क्रिकेट में मैं भी तेंदुलकर को बोल रहा अगर 200 लोग यहाँ मर रहे हैं वहाँ 100 लोग मर रहे हैं आप अगर जस्टिस का आदमी को बुलाएंगे किसको बचाना है व्हाट इज राइट एंड व्हाट इज रॉन्ग ये 200 भी एक माँ बाप का बेटा है वो 100 भी एक माँ बाप जब तक वो डिसाइड करें 200 लोग मर जाएंगे आप बेंथम को बुलाएंगे he will give you immediate answers 200 is more than 100 that 100 will say that 100 die इसके बेंथम का ये आंसर क्या है objective answers to questions of morality if you use quantity then you get objective answers because बेंथम का क्या है argument for example if I can explain Locke was concerned with liberty Hobbes was concerned with security Hobbes ने क्या कहा security is very important but when you understand between security and liberty now, this is a very important thing. When Hobbes said order is more important than justice. भाई अगर आप ऐसा व्यक्ति को पकड़ ले जो बॉम्ब छुपाए और उनको आप मारना चाहते हैं, तभी वो बॉम्ब कहाँ छुपाए बताएंगे. Like suppose you beat him, then immediately he will say you are violating my human rights because I have a right not to be tortured. So Bentham will say that we can torture him because that is going to increase the pleasure of the society. Let pleasure and pain decide what is right and what is wrong. Let us not believe in antecedent answers. Human rights are not antecedently given by nature, they are contingently given by the state. That means here, this a priori things Bentham attacked. Because these a priori things, they are putting the society into jeopardy. For example, Americans who believe in human rights, they preach to the entire world the importance of human rights. And they said, when a terrorist was arrested in India or in Pakistan, they said, no, don't torture him. He's a human being. He's having his own dignity. And then talk to him in a civilized way and interrogate him in a civilized way. But when 9/11 took place, Americans suddenly they supported Hobbes. Until then, they were talking in the Lockean language because he is the father of American Constitution, liberty, freedom. But when America was put into security concerns, then they took a U-turn and they said Hobbes is very relevant. So why this change? It is all because of you understand that these are when you talk about the human rights, whether human rights must be understood contingently or a priori. Now, a priori things, of course, they have their own importance. So Bentham cannot say because he wanted to reform the society, he cannot say that everything must be, of course, understood from the perspective of pleasure and pain. Now, I can give you one example. For example, when we come to Dworkin, and Dworkin is one philosopher whom I admire personally. And I, of course, taking right seriously one very popular book written by Ronald Dworkin. Now, in that book, when you see, that Dworkin is saying that इसमें भी आपको मैं एक these are all my examples. These examples are not taken from any book. So when I was in the classroom, spontaneously came to mind. So that if I can explain that in Hindi, it is good. Hindi English में उतना मजा नहीं आएगा. So suppose a beautiful girl had come and then she wants to marry some teachers who are not married until now, and then because she comes to know that very eligible bachelors are there, and then she is sitting next to me, and then she says, "Who is the most competent battler?" तो वहाँ एक टीचर है, वो खड़ा हो जाएगा. वो कहेगा, "Madam, I am the best person to marry you because I am a student of Bentham. I only believe in pleasure, madam. And then after marriage, I will give you only pleasure and pleasure. I will always avoid pain. And then pain is something which is not, I will never accept it." Okay, madam says, okay. Then ये आदमी यहाँ जो है, he said, "I am no less a candidate than him. I believe in justice. I am a student of Immanuel Kant, and then I believe categorical morality is not contingent. Morality is categorical. Now it is autonomy, it is free will, and then so on and so forth." He says, I am the most competent, eligible bachelor. तीसरा आदमी वहाँ जो है वो खड़ा हो जाएगा, वो कहेगा, "मैडम, आई एम मिक्सचर ऑफ दीज टू. I believe in utility and I also believe in justice." इसका मतलब ये बताएगा, "मैडम, there is nothing wrong in calculation. You are of course guided by pleasure and pain." You not see that it is irrelevant. You also believe in calculation. But madam, I have something which is a basic structure. What is this basic structure? Please try to understand here. For example, Professor Mrutyunjay, he says that, "Sir, I keep on changing every second. What is wrong yesterday may become right today. What is right today may become wrong because I calculate on the basis of pleasure and pain." But this teacher sitting next to me, he says, "Sir, I am like Mrutyunjay, but I am having a Gorkinian approach." What is that? Even I calculate. अगर मृत्युंजय को आज चाय पिलाया हूँ, कल ये चाय पिलाएंगे तो परसों पिलाएंगे. अगर ये नहीं कल पिलाया तो मैं लगातार इतना पागल नहीं पिलाएगा. I calculate. Calculate करना एक ह्यूमन नेचर की है. लेकिन आगे कैसा डिस्कशन को लेके जाएंगे? आगे डिस्कशन में ये लड़का बताता है, ये लड़का का तो मेरा उम्र कैसे लड़का है, तो ये बताता है, "There are certain areas where I don't calculate." मेरा माता जी, पिताजी, they are so important to me. They are intrinsic to me. So there, I don't calculate. Though it is giving me pain, I continue to do that because they are my fundamental rights. I mean, when you say human rights, when you say that human rights are beyond utility,
That means, of course, everything is a matter of utility, but there are certain things which must be kept away from utility. And that is where you say, my mother and father. Because I cannot be, have some individuality. मेरा अंदर कुछ वजन है. And this is where he is saying that, सर मेरा यूटिलिटी का हवा जब आएगा, मेरा अंदर सब कुछ उड़ेगा नहीं. Utility का हवा आने पर भी I can resist it. And I can say that I will continue to do the thing, though it might give me pain. But even then I will continue because she is my mother. Now that way we define our fundamental rights in the constitution. We said fundamental rights are beyond utility. That means it might of course cause lot of pain to the majority. And there might be a very easy solution. Give pleasure to the majority, take back the fundamental rights of minority. But we will not do that. Because there are certain rights which are beyond utility. Are you following me or not?
Yes.
So that is where, when we talk about these higher things are very important because these, of course, put us in the right track, and then they tell us what should be our conduct. No, we cannot always be very empirical or very pragmatic in our approach. A principled approach and a prudential approach. A prudential approach में मुझे क्या मिलता है? देखो principled approach में क्या है? Principled approach में आप ये सोचें कि this is something which I do. Okay, now coming back to 5 more minutes, sir. I just have this rule utility, act utility. What is this act utility? Now, anyone can give an example. Okay, I will give example. There's a doctor, and then एक मरीज गया. See, I just I'm speaking in Hindi also, but then now I will not do it. A patient went to a doctor, and the patient, of course, is having some problem in the kidney or something. It's not a big problem. The doctor was already having 3 big patients. One is having a serious problem in liver, heart. Second one, third one is having a pancreatic problem. Suppose you are a Benthamite doctor, what will you do? You will ask the patient to come. You come inside. No, you are having, of course, a very small problem. So he will kill you. And he will take his kidney and give it to the person who is having. And then he will say 1 died, but 3, of course, are saved. 3 are saved. And that is the best thing he will do. Okay, understand? That means here, that is act utility. That means what will happen in the future, people will stop going to doctors. Because they are so afraid of doctors that they will stop going to doctors. In the same manner, a judge is there who gives a judgment which is not in accordance with justice, but that is going to increase the utility. Because that would act as a deterrent for the other offenders. But then in the future, people will lose confidence in judiciary. Are you following? Now, what is the way out? How can you say, please no follow me? How can you say that even utility can be consistent with human rights? Because when you criticize them, utilitarians are not consistent in their answers with regard to what is right and what is. Their answers keep on changing in accordance with pleasure and pain. So the biggest allegation is that they don't talk about justice, they are not interested in the priority things, they don't respect human rights, but they have retorted. And वो लोग क्या बता रहे हैं? हम भी मानवाधिकार को importance देंगे. Even we respect human rights. How? Rule utility. So what can be the examples of rule utility? No, in rule utility, you don't take the decision yourself. Now, in act utility, you act according to your wisdom. You decide where is pleasure and where is pain. But in rule utility, Professor Mrityunjay, myself and other teacher, we of course as the government, and we will tell you, we will make some rules, and we will tell you, you follow these rules, and utility will increase. So, tomorrow, when actually you are having that particular situation, no, you should not use your wisdom. You should only consult the rule and then you should follow the rule. But the gentleman sitting there, he will take an argument with me. He will say, sir, if I follow the rule, what is the result? Pain is increasing. And utilitarian will never welcome pain. And utilitarian always wants pleasure. So, sir, this particular thing wherein you are asking me to follow the rule, knowing fully well that the pain is going to increase. So, why should I follow the rule? Now, my answer is what? Because we three will answer, you don't calculate yourself. We have already calculated in a long-term approach. Now you are only concerned with immediate pleasure and pain, but we calculated for a period of time, for a durable time. And then we tell you, immediately it might give you pain, but you should continue with that only, though it is giving you pain, because in the longer run, we believe it is going to increase the pleasure. Now what is the example I can give you? For example, you are on the road, and then you see the red light. You have to stop at the red light, but you think it's 2 o'clock in the morning, there is no one on the road and no accident of course will take place, and then you want to cross the red light. So if you are an apt utilitarian, you will do that, because if you do that, you can save time, you can save many other things, pressure is going to be increased, so you want to just cross the red light and then go. But suppose you are a rule utilitarian, rules will say what you have to always stop at the red light. No, you are caught in a dilemma, whether to comply with the rule or to cross the red light. Now, the rule utilitarian will tell you always stand there, though it might give you pain, though it might give you pain in the immediate run, because in future you have calculated that. So that way they give you answers. But then one very important thing is what? आपका अभी जितना भी lectures हुआ, I can have one question. See, utility is also a very humanizing principle. We always accuse Bentham, but Bentham was a great humanitarian. तो हम लोगों का बेंथम का मैंने आपको एक एग्जांपल दिया, आप एक एग्जांपल देंगे, उस एग्जांपल के साथ वापस तुरंत आ जाएंगे. See, Bentham will ask you to be impartial. What is that impartiality? Where is that impartiality? Equality. Bentham believes in equality. And what is that equality? Suppose आपका जन्मदिन है, आप रसगुल्ला पसंद करते हैं, लेकिन आपने जिस मेहमान को इनवाइट किया उसे लोग गुलाब जाम पसंद करते हैं, तो बेंथम क्या कहेगा? मेजॉरिटी लाइक्स गुलाब जाम, ऑन दैट डे यू शुड आल्सो ईट गुलाब जाम, though it is your birthday, though you are giving the party, because Bentham will say you don't have any more weight than others, all will be given the same importance, all will be given the. So आपका जन्मदिन होने पर भी आपको बहुमत लोग जो करते हैं वही आपको करना है, उस दिन आपको वही करना है. This is where utility का आंसर क्या है? देखिए, objective answers to morality. Now what is that objective answer? Anyone? Objective answer, okay, because time is running out. Objective answers क्या है? Suppose आपके पास medicine है, and then you see two human beings, they are having sickness, and then they are sick, and then to whom the medicine must be given? Obviously you will say the person who is having the bigger problem, उनको पहले देंगे, because you have medicine only for one person, but there are two human beings with the same disease. So you will see, or you want an objective answer. तो आप क्या कहेंगे? इनका बीमारी ज्यादा, इनको दे दो. But suppose वो दो human beings में एक आपका बेटा होगा. Are you following me now? Justice is neutral. That is what Rawls say. So justice is neutral. तो utilitarians में आपसे क्या कहेंगे? आपका बेटा होने पर भी आप अपना बेटा को उतना ही वजन दीजिए जितना दूसरा को बेटा है. तो आपको मेडिसिन उनको दीजिए जो जिसका ज्यादा जरूरी है. Are you following me? But then people say this is a highly demanding morality. Itna morality wherein I should look at my son in the same manner as I look at others. You understand that? This is something which is to a demanding morality. To a demanding morality. So rule utilitarians, they of course wanted to say that even we accept human rights. So they are coming, but understand, they don't come closer to Kant. No, you will say, that means sir, no Kant और इनमें कोई अंतर नहीं है. तो कैंट ने भी कहा पेन होने पर भी आपको सत्य सत्य के लिए बोलना ही पड़ेगा. अब ये लोग भी क्या कर रहे हैं? पेन होने पर भी आपको वही कहा है. जनरल यूटिलिटी क्या बताएगा? पेन होने पर उसको अवॉइड करो, प्लेजर को स्वागत करो. पर रूल यूटिलिटी क्या बताया? पेन होने पर भी आपको वही काम. इसमें दे आर आल्सो कमिंग क्लोजर टू कैंट. लेकिन अंतर क्या है? कैंट नेवर गिव द आंसर्स ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ प्लेजर एंड पेन. ही वाज ओनली कंसर्न्ड विद बिकॉज़ इट इज राइट, यू हैव टू डू द राइट थिंग. दैट्स ऑल. But even zero utilitarians, they are basing their answers on pleasure and pain. Of course, in the longer run. Of course, in the longer run. Now, rule utility ka, jab is prakar se when they did, so they said even we can be consistent in our talk on rights. That means even we can say what is wrong yesterday will be wrong today also, today, tomorrow also. What is right yesterday? What is fundamental right? Fundamentally right. What is the distinction between ordinary rights and fundamental right? Fundamentally right means it is right yesterday, it is right today, it is right tomorrow. Ordinary right, they need not be so, because they can change. But fundamental rights are fundamentally right. So when we talk about utility and fundamental rights as sworn enemies, because fundamental rights, so far as utility is concerned, the answers keep on changing. But rule utility is saying that even we can give consistent answers. Even we are not that much against human rights. But then what will you say? The answer is, you will say, rule utilitarians, of course you can respect human rights, but you are respecting human rights for anyone. You are respecting human rights. The rule utilitarians can accept human rights. Okay? Because they say rules, of course, are consistent. Though human beings in their conduct are not consistent, the rules make them consistent. So Mrityunjay is supposed to follow the rule irrespective of pain or pleasure. So it's making him consistent. But then, when you say that tomorrow you are teaching in the classroom and you say that rule utilitarians, of course, they can accommodate human rights consistently, but then immediately followed by, but for wrong reasons. The reasons are not correct, though they arrived at the answer. That is what Immanuel Kant said. अगर आप प्रेम से करुणा से भिखारी को पैसा देंगे, you did the right thing, but for the wrong reason. You did the right thing, but for the wrong reason. That means do the right thing for the right reason. That is what Immanuel Kant said. Do the right thing for the right reason. But then if you do the right thing, but for the wrong reason, you can support human right. But why should you support human right? Because he is also human being. For example, इसमें आप एक सड़क पर एक आदमी खड़ा है, उस आदमी को आप धकेल देंगे ना, धकेल देंगे तो आपको वहां बहुत से प्रकार का जान बच सकता है. आप क्यों नहीं धकेला? बिकॉज बहुत से लोग मर जाएंगे. लेकिन दैट कैन नॉट, इट इज रॉन्ग रीजन. You treat that person as an individual unto himself. He is an end to himself. He is also having human dignity. So don't use him as a means to an end. That means you are using that man as a means to other people cross करना है. Other people के लिए आप उनको importance दे रहे हैं. लेकिन इमैनुअल कैंट क्या कहेगा? उनके लिए importance दो. मतलब उनका dignity के अनुसार आपको कार्य करना पड़ेगा. Are you following me or not? And finally, Mrityunjay, one more question before I finally say, because you must be getting. I can go on and on and on. उसमें क्या है? Rule utilitarians ने एक काम किया, वो आपको बताना पड़ेगा. Then the question is, can partiality be justified impartially? Can partiality be justified impartially? See, when you attack the utilitarians by saying that they of course are neutral between their children and others' children, which is too high demanding morality. So rule utilitarians came out with a solution. They said we can be partial, but we can support, justify partiality in impartial terms. पक्षपात करेंगे लेकिन निष्पक्ष रूप में इसको समर्थन करेंगे. ये कैसा होगा?
Reasonable classification like we have under Article 14.
ओके. सपोज आप अपना बेटा को पहले करेंगे, आप कहेंगे बाकी बेटाओं को बाद में करेंगे. That means you आपने पक्षपात किया. That means you said that because he is your son or she is your daughter. Utilitarians will say no. You should give the same importance to your children as you give to others' children. And then that is where you are expected to make human rights. What are human rights? Ultimately, human rights are you are not an Indian, you are not a Pakistani. You are a human being first. So let us consider in a rational. That is what Immanuel Kant said. And we take a step back from the empirical world and behind the veil of ignorance. Now you say that whether he is a Hindu or a Muslim, that is not important. What is important is we act rationally. We don't act according to our empirical faculties. We act according to our reasonable capacity. तो उसमें क्या होगा? You can be neutral. You can be impartial. किसको ज़्यादा जरूरी है? अभी इसराइल क्या करेगा? जाके वही जूस को बचाएगा जहाँ भी होगा. But they say because we are all Jews. But then when you talk about human rights as neutral things, then you say इसराइल को जिसको ज़्यादा जरूरी है उनको बचाना चाहिए. जूस से ज़्यादा जिसको जरूरी है उसको बचाना पड़ेगा.
So one example can be America's international security agenda, where they intervene in others' territory and protect women. In the name of protecting women, they enter into the territory.
Yes, yes.
They intervene
Yeah.
and cause all sorts of trouble.
Now, America cannot be given as an ideal example because Americans always interfere for wrong reasons. Okay. I don't believe that. Then see, what I'm trying to tell you here is that when you are supposed to be neutral, when you want to raise about the empirical things, when you want to say that I want to give a reasonable answer. So reason is not concerned with the mundane. Reason is something which is operating in its own sphere. And then you can get neutrality. और न्यूट्रलिटी को बेंथम ने स्वीकार नहीं किया. कि बेंथम ने क्या क्या मंडेन वर्ल्ड में यूटिलिटी के लिए क्या बताया? जिसको ऑब्जेक्टिव आंसर्स चाहिए. आपका बेटा होने पर भी आपको जिसको ज्यादा जरूरी है उनको देना है. दैट मींस ये अपना बेटा को दे देंगे तो क्या होगा? यू आर नॉट गिविंग ऑब्जेक्टिव आंसर्स टू क्वेश्चंस ऑफ मोरालिटी. आई थिंक यू कैन अंडरस्टैंड. बट देन मैडम इसमें एक एग्जांपल मैं आपको देकर समाप्त कर देंगे. Tomorrow again we can meet. So how can you justify? Rule utilitarians in their anxiety to give consistent answers, they said that if Mr. X is giving importance to his children, they are particular children. They are particular. Even Plato was confronted in Karl Marx. Particular. Today when we talk about private versus public dichotomy, what is natural, what is unnatural, so the capitalism is natural, the socialism is natural. Because Marx will say socialism is natural. मार्क्स क्या कहेगा? हमारा सत्य है. कैपिटलिस्ट कहेगा मेरा सत्य है. ये मेरा हमारा में झगड़ा हो रहा है दुनिया में. हमारा और मेरा में झगड़ा इतना दूर तक आ गया. तो हमारा को मेरा को मिटाना इतना आसान नहीं है. और मेरा में ही सब कुछ है. अमेरिकन से ही कहेंगे. ओबामा जब भारत में आया, व्हेन ही वाज आस्क्ड व्हाट इज द सीक्रेट ऑफ अमेरिकन इकोनॉमी, ही सेड मेरा को विश्वास, प्राइवेटाइजेशन. अगर यहाँ बत्ती बंद करके नहीं जाएंगे तो सरकारी संस्थान तो कोई नहीं. लेकिन टाटा बिरला को तो टीचर का वेतन से 500 रुपया काट. क्योंकि इसका मतलब प्राइवेट इज रियल. दैट इज व्हाट दे से. So what is all these are bigger issues. So what I am trying to say here is that when you give importance to your own children, particular, you say that the utility is again you are justifying that in the name of utility. Because they are my children, I know their requirements better than other parents. So if I address their problems, that will be doing things in a better manner and utility will be served better. So it is not that I am doing, I am focusing on my children first. I am focusing because it is what a utilitarian reason. They of course are my children, but I know their requirement better. So if others come and attend to their problems, they cannot be that effective. So let me attend to that. So I am supporting, I am justifying partiality, impartiality. Are you following? So once their problems are solved, then I will look into other people's problems. You understand that? So finally the conclusion is what? When Plato was confronted with this question, how to come out of this metaphysical things, how to come out of this, because you see every philosopher, like our Mrityunjay can also become, this gentleman can also become, my best wishes are with them, because they are so committed teachers. I have been seeing them since yesterday. That is what we lack in the present world. So Plato ने क्या कहा? ये we are always in मेरा मेरा, कोई समाज के बारे में नहीं सोच रहा है. मेरा कहाँ से आया? शादी से आया. तो मेरा में ही मेरा बेटा है. शादी के माध्यम से पता चलता है. Abolish the institution of marriage. Because he said that Marx said that abolish the institution of private property. Private property को हटा दो जब आपका समाज में. So with these words, I do not know how did I deliver the lecture, but then I was on and off on.
So when we were asked to sir to deliver a lecture on natural law and metaphysics, sir asked this question: how much my lecture would be relevant for your research method? Because you are delivering your CVP is all about research method, and the theme, one of the theme is research method in jurisprudence. So whenever we study jurisprudence, we are confused whether any research method is there in jurisprudence when somebody is saying something, what is law, what is not law. So is it not based upon some method to say that is it law or not law? So naturally there is a research method in jurisprudence, and on that basis, sir has to explore that in a Greek world.